Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Biden indicts the Minneapolis police, is the Wall Street Journal op-ed on the announcement that Attorney General Merrick Garland will investigate the entire Minneapolis Police Department in the wake of the Derek Chauvin conviction.
And this is what he's focusing on.
Will assess whether the Minneapolis Police Department engages in a pattern or practice of using excessive force. Will also assess whether the MPD engages in discriminatory conduct.
Mm-hmm. And so you can expect a consent decree to be forthcoming, like we saw in Chicago under the Obama administration, which was rescinded by the Trump administration, which was reinstituted normatively by Mayor Lightfoot, and see how well that's improved the situation on the ground in Chicago. For more on this and many other legal matters, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend Andy McCarthy. He's a former prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. He's also the author of the #1 bestseller, Ball of Collusion, and he's a contributing editor at National Review, too. Andy, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Dan and Amy, great to be with you.
Is that a fair read, the Wall Street Journal Ed Board suggesting that this is going to just further hamper policing in Minneapolis and by extension make that city less safe? We're going to get another consent decree, and micromanaging police departments from D.C. is not normally a particularly good idea.
Yep, absolutely right. That, and I think Heather McDonald had a great piece in the City Journal along the same lines yesterday. I hate to say I told you so, but, when they were talking all this defund the police nonsense over the summer, I pointed out that if Biden won, all that was agitation behind which the guy in the nice suit comes with his consent decree. So first they create the atmosphere for this kind of stuff, and then the Biden Justice Department would be the return of the Obama Justice Department. And they were never planning to refund the police. They're planning to reform the police in the progressive prosecutor image, which is working so well in cities around the country like San Francisco and Los Angeles and Philadelphia. Even in Philadelphia, the Democratic Party would not renominate Larry Krasner, who is the district attorney there, the progressive district attorney, because even they know he's a disaster. So
right.
This is what the left wants.
We have one of those Soros-backed non-prosecution prosecutors in Chicago too. Her name is Kim Fox, as you well know, and it is remarkable to see this from Mosby in Baltimore and Krasner in Philly and Bowden in San Francisco and Gasson now in L.A. Who they threw out the previous prosecutor there, black female Democrat, because she wasn't a non-prosecutor enough. So they got a white guy who's more of a non-prosecutor.
Yep. Yeah, this is the trend around the country. And the thing is, I know this sounds alarmist, but historians would point out, I was looking at, I think it was Paul Johnson, history that he had written of Europe in modern times. But, the Bolsheviks were only a very small percentage of the Russian population, but they captured the institutions of enforcement and opinion, and that allowed them to punch way, way above their weight. And, people look back historically and say, how does a group that really doesn't have that much popular support, how is it able to carry this kind of thing out? And it's happened again and again in history, and it's very troubling to look at what's happening to the rule of law in the United States.
Where's a Menshevik
situation
where's a Menshevik when you need one, right?
Yeah, right. But I mean, just this guy in Columbus, Brooklyn Center, merely saying that the cop who tragically accidentally shot Dante Wright in Brooklyn Center, that the cop deserves due process. That used to be like common sense, that everybody deserves due process.
That's fireable.
They fired the city manager over that. I mean, it's just remarkable.
Well, let's talk about what happened in Brooklyn Center. Do you think it affected the the jury at all in the George Floyd case? I mean, look, they saw 9 days of rioting, and I'm sure that gave them great pauses. Oh my gosh, if we don't convict Derek Chauvin, this town's going to burn up again, and towns across the country are.
Yeah, and Amy, that was only the most recent 9 days of it. I mean, basically there have been demonstrations and violence on and off since George Floyd's death. And I think, there are a number of things that you can point to, like, the judge wouldn't move the case out of Chauvin's case out of Hennepin County, even though he was very plausibly arguing he couldn't get a fair trial there. The judge says he's going to take care of it in jury selection by, being very exacting and making sure they get a fair jury. And then in the middle of jury selection, Minneapolis, which is the jurisdiction that is constitutionally duty-bound to give Chauvin a fair trial, picks that moment to announce that they're making a $27 million settlement with Floyd's family. And then the judge wouldn't sequester the jury after Brooklyn Center, even though they were at the end of the evidence and they were going to be sequestered when summation started anyway. There was no reason to send them home for a long weekend when everybody knew what the weekend was going to be like, which you just very accurately described. So I think it's not just one thing. I mean, I've been asked a million times about dopey Maxine Waters and senescent President Biden, and running off at the mouth about this case in the last few days. And those things are bad, but in isolation, they would mean nothing. You'd basically say to the jury, have you heard about this, and does it change your ability to be fair and impartial? But here, there's such accumulation of evidence that this guy didn't get a fair trial. And then you put on top of it, why did the judge send them home for a long weekend? Because the case was so complex in terms of the medical evidence and the use of force evidence and the voluminous police volumes and all that stuff, that the lawyers needed an extra day to prepare their summations. Well, fine, but then the jury decides the case in less than a day without a single note asking for a reread of some testimony or an explanation of some point of law or to look at some exhibit? Really?
The issue of what Maxine Waters had to say and what Joe Biden had to say before the verdict. We referenced the piece that you wrote for the New York Post yesterday in our conversation. Alan Dershowitz took it a step further than you did. Not just that it's a legitimate issue on which to appeal, but also that the conviction should be overturned on the basis of what Biden and Maxine Waters had to say. Would you go that far?
I would say no. I wouldn't say that on the basis of just those two things. What I would say is, in isolation, that's one thing. In the accumulation of these events, it's something else entirely. And I might feel the same way Alan did if we were talking about a federal prosecution, because then you would be talking about U.S. officials who have an obligation to uphold the federal judicial system. As much as they should be ethically and morally obliged to do that with respect to the state systems, they don't. It's not the same obligation. But all the more reason, like what in the world is Maxine Waters, a federal congresswoman from California, doing in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, after a curfew that the locally democratically elected mayor has imposed to try to tamp down on the violence? What is she doing in Minnesota interfering with their justice system? It's outrageous.
Yeah, it would be less outrageous if maybe she would have at least gotten a ride on Al Sharpton's private plane, so we wouldn't have had to foot the bill for her travel. But yeah,
Right.
I want you to listen to what White House spokesperson Jen Psaki had to say yesterday when queried about now the next phase here, which is the George Floyd criminal police reform bill that Biden and the Biden administration is touting, and asked about reducing the threshold necessary for a federal civil rights conviction against a police officer.
He believes the bar for convicting officers is far too high. It needs to be changed. He's a strong supporter, as he also conveyed passionately last night, of the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which does change the intent standard. Obviously, there is negotiations that need to happen on Capitol Hill, but he believes the bar is too high.
Now, Jen Psaki doesn't know what she's talking about, but you do, which is why we have you on the show. The criminal intent standard in the George Floyd bill would lower the criminal intent standard from willful to knowing or reckless. Explain to us what that would implicate.
Yeah, well, willful means that you have to understand. It almost turns on its head the old adage that ignorance of the law is no excuse. You have to know that what you're doing is a violation of the law and do it anyway with evil intent. So it's the highest standard in the criminal law in terms of intent. But, I would encourage people to remember that the backdrop here is that the civil rights laws are the way that the federal government interferes and intrudes itself into what is supposed to be a state law obligation. So, for example, there's no reason that the federal government needs to come in to Minneapolis to deal with what happened with Chauvin, because the state prosecutors, perfectly well dealt with that case. You could certainly argue, as we have, that this guy didn't get, Chauvin didn't get due process, but I don't think anybody could look at the evidence they had and say that it was an irrational verdict. You can disagree with it around the edges, but they have their legal system in the state, and they pursued it. The idea that the Justice Department has to come into these cases because the states can't do justice on their own is just people ought to be very put off by it. And in fact, it's just a scheme to allow for progressives to radically change the criminal justice system in one fell swoop by just federalizing it and then layering on top of it their preferred processes. So I think, if we start to argue about it over, something as comparatively small as what should the mens rea standard be for a civil rights prosecution, I think we're missing the bigger picture, which is that these guys are trying to take this progressive prosecutor model, federalize it, and then impose it on the whole country.
Well, right, but you could also see states mirror this, and it's also too, because not everybody is Andy McCarthy, a legal scholar. It's the message you're sending. We're gunning for cops. We're lowering the standards that we can get them, and what that does to policing.
Yeah, you're right. When all this gas bagging about defund the police was going on over the summer, while we were having the 2020 campaign, I tried to point out to people that the plan was not to defund the police. The plan was to reform the police. So the defunders and the rioters create the conditions in which, the progressive politicians then come in and say, no, we're not looking to defund the police. We want to reform them under President Obama's 21st century policing standards. And what that is the imposition of the progressive prosecutor model on the country. And you're quite right to say that there are a lot of localities around the country who may do this anyway, but that's America. We're supposed to have, we have 50 states with 50 different ways of doing things. And if you live in a city like you guys do, and I used to live in New York, where the public is dopey enough to put these people in power, you kind of get what you pay for, unfortunately.
He is Andy McCarthy, former chief assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. He is National Review contributing editor and the author of the #1 bestseller, Ball of Collusion. Andy, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a great week.
Thanks, you too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
If you purchase your own health insurance, I have some great news. From now until August 15th, the health insurance exchanges are open again. And even if you've never qualified for a health insurance subsidy before, you most likely will now. The American Rescue Plan, signed on March 11th, expanded subsidy eligibility to millions of Americans who have never qualified before, even to those with high income levels, and especially those between the ages of 50 and 65. Those who qualify for unemployment benefits are now guaranteed the lowest priced plan. Employers who provide small group coverage also have new options, and so do seniors looking for Medicare supplement coverage. Call me. I can help.
If you're tired of calling a bureaucrat at an 800 number to help you navigate Obamacare, then you need a local expert on your side. Your own health insurance mentor, C. Stephen Tucker from healthinsurancementors.com, is someone I know and trust. He's a 25-year licensed broker who's been educating our listeners for 10 years. Tell them how they can get in touch with you, Steve.
Thanks, Dad. They can visit healthinsurancementors.com or call me directly at 630-674-1551.
All right. For years, you've heard the familiar name of Turnkey IT. Our calling answer line is Turnkey IT. And they've helped hundreds of Chicagoland businesses, many of which are also supporters of AM 560. They help with IT solutions. But now Turnkey turns a new chapter in their business, Turnkey Consulting. Yes, Turnkey Consulting came out of the need for so many small businesses looking for help to grow their business beyond just networking systems. Great team of consulting experts over there. I know a few of them, and they have decades of real-world experience in both corporate and small businesses. Folks, they know how to make an immediate impact to drive your company forward, no matter the size or industry. So get started today with Turnkey's Opportunity Scorecard. That provides a thorough analysis of your business, its systems, its offering, and most importantly, a roadmap to greater profits. In just 2 weeks, 14 days, you can have a new insight into making 2021 your company's best year ever. And right now, that Opportunity Scorecard is half off. So visit turnkey.pro to schedule an appointment. That's turnkey.pro.
It's David Hochberg of Team Hochberg. For the past 20 years, I've built my business helping first responders and medical professionals with their mortgages, and I wanted to do more than just say thank you. Every week, Team Hochberg recognizes first responders and medical professionals for keeping us safe and healthy. This week, we are recognizing Fire Chief Brian Lamble, Deputy Chiefs John Nolan, Battalion Chiefs Tim Cassidy, Aaron Grandgeorge, Dane Fenniger, Todd Nowak, and Assistant Fire Chief Brian Loomis, as well as the 75 firefighters and 9 civilian support staff of the Mount Prospect Fire Department. First responders and medical professionals deserve our appreciation, and family-owned businesses need our support. If you can afford to do so, please purchase lunch from a family-owned restaurant for your local police and fire department, as well as medical professionals. If you have mortgage questions, please call me at 855-56-DAVID or visit 56david.com. That number again is 855-563-2843 or visit 56david.com. Homeside Financial Legal Housing Lender, MLS 112-4061.
All right. Do you remember last year's historic rainfall? I do. Our friends at Permaseal certainly do. As much as they love helping homeowners solve their problems, they'd prefer to help you avoid them. So today's a great day to call Permaseal, 800-421-SEAL, for a free foundation inspection. Their inspectors will identify any potential problems you may have with your basement walls, floors, window wells, and sump pumps, and provide you with a written estimate on any existing problems that you keep living with. They're also trained and certified to identify structural problems or other concerns that you may have. So, yes, the inspection is free, folks, but the peace of mind that you'll have when the thunderstorms come rolling through is